Hello, and welcome to another episode of Schlock Tactics, the movie podcast where we believe badder is better and aim to review the craptastic cash-ins so that you don't have to. My name is Ash, and I'm finally joined again by Mark. Oh, hi, Mark.
Good evening.
We are back after 6-7 months away.
Yeah.
We have survived the apocalypse, and if you're listening to this, then you have as well, so congratulations. It's been 7 long months since our last episode that we did, which was actually the Razzies special. And then I think
Which didn't go ahead.
It didn't go ahead. But then eventually it did. And by that point, I couldn't be bothered to check. So
did it actually go ahead?
It did go ahead at some point, but it wasn't a ceremony because it couldn't have been a ceremony. So
Yeah.
I don't actually know who won or if our predictions were correct. Maybe you guys out there do. But if you want to go back and listen to that episode, we did review 5 of the worst movies from 2019 to 2020. Seems trivial now to bitch about movies that came out when there have been no movies that have come out in the last 6 months. But we are back here to cheer you all up, hopefully, and talk about some shitty old movies that you can definitely go and check out. So today we are going to be reviewing 2 movies that were basically cash-ins on very successful toys from the 80s. So that's the Garbage Pail Kids Movie and Masters of the Universe, both from 1987. Are you aware of either of these franchises before we watch these films, Mark?
Definitely Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a lot of people sort of our age to have grown up watching.
Yeah.
But I hadn't seen it. It wasn't part of my childhood.
Yeah, I'm a 35-year-old man with a He-Man t-shirt in my collection that I wear often, and get other 35-year-old men saying, "Oh, that's a nice t-shirt. Oh, He-Man." Yeah, so a lot of us do fondly remember Masters of the Universe.
I hadn't heard of Garbage Pail Kids until recently.
I bet you wish you hadn't. So we'll talk about Garbage Pail Kids first then. So for the uninitiated or younger viewers maybe, that the Garbage Pail Kids were a parody of the Cabbage Patch Kids, which were these really cutesy dolls from the mid-80s, that like were just fat baby doll things, really cutesy. So they designed this parody rather than the Cabbage Patch, the Garbage Pail Kids, and they would all have their own sort of power is a bit of a stretch, but there's sort of weirdness about them. You know, one would fart, one would vomit, one would be toxic, radioactive, all these different like gross things. It would be just trying to do the opposite of the Cabbage Patch Kids, which were meant to be really cute and cuddly. It's like the Care Bears and the Were Bears, if anyone remembers that as well. So they were wildly successful, so successful that they got sued by the makers of the Cabbage Patch Kids for being a blatant rip-off. Yeah. I thought there were sort of laws protecting parodies, but I guess when you're making money hand over fist, there has to be some sort of amendment to your design. And a lot of the Garbage Pail Kids, they were trading cards, not actual dolls, but they were banned in schools as well because parents were worried about the bad influence they would have on their children. The children would start farting and picking their nose, etc. As if they were giving ideas to them.
All these terrible crimes they'll do.
This was I think this was somewhere between the Dungeons and Dragons turned my kid into a Satanist and the Doom turned my son into a machine gun toting maniac. We're somewhere in 1987, somewhere in the middle there. This is from 1987, Garbage Pail Kids Movie, the full title. And something I don't think I've really ever seen. A Metascore of 1.
Yeah,
just
oh my God.
1. And a Rotten Tomatoes 0%. Now, I looked this up earlier today, and there are only about 40-ish films that have ever got a 0% rotten, rather. Many films have been rotten. A 0% rotten. We've only reviewed one of them, which was Gotti from 2 years ago, Razzie special. So, yeah, a lot of those on there we haven't looked at, so perhaps we've got more digging to do. There's plenty more out there for us.
Yeah.
But this is one of them, 0% rotten, 1 on Metascore. One of the most notorious bad films ever, so it's about time we got to it, really. Film starts off with some sort of weird outer space montage, and all of the trading cards, the original trading cards, are just like flying in front of the camera to show you basically what characters you're going to be seeing. And then sort of cut to a weird curio shop. These kids are emerging from this sort of oozing trash can. Garbage pail is just an American word for trash can, I guess. There's like a posh English guy that owns the shop. And it's a little bit of a cliche, I think, of lots of films from this era, of there being the protagonist being a little kid who's being bullied. And to avoid the bullying, he goes to hang out in like a weird shop.
Kind of reminds me of Little Shop of Horrors. Or
Yeah, like Never-Ending Story. The kid hides out in a bookshop. Last Action Hero, the kid hides out in a cinema, and there's always a kindly older gentleman there to help them out and give them some encouragement. So this is a real cliche of 80s and 90s kids films. He is being bullied by these goons. One of them is called Juice. These guys are actually one of the better parts of the film, I thought, because they were actually funny. They're probably the only thing I did laugh at in this film with their dialogue. Get out of here, loser. Beat it, creep. No one messes with me. You know, this kind of like stock goon dialogue actually did make me laugh. And it's all to impress these sort of 80s babes with their like massive hair and their leopard print leotards and all of that, and they're all like, "Oh, he's so cool. He's so like psychotically violent to little children." You know, they're really impressed. So the little kid, the protagonist, is called Dodger, and he does hide out in this magical shop run by this old guy called Captain Manzini, and he says, "Whatever you do, don't touch the garbage pail. Don't touch the bin." That's the one rule of the shop. But then his crush. One of the girlfriends of these goons called Tangerine. It's a weird... so that's Tangerine and Juice.
Pretty stupid character names.
Yeah, Tangerine Juice, this couple, if you're keeping score. She visits the shop, and then her boyfriends come in. They have a bit of a scuffle. These stock 80s goons, you know. And then in the scuffle, the garbage pail gets knocked off, and the kids are unleashed into the world. They sort of chase off these goons, and then they sort of go into the sewer, where these goons are going to stuff Dodger down into the sewer, but then the Garbage Pail Kids go down there, and there's like these massive cartoon pipes that we're led to believe are just full of shit.
Yeah.
And they're comically labelled, like one is going to the city zoo, one is going to some sort of TV station. So the Garbage Pail Kids simply turn a nozzle, and it sprays the bad guys with shit. And that's the first indication in this film that there's going to be a lot of toilet humour. Yeah. And endless.
Kind of slapstickness.
Yeah. Garbage Pail Kids here, we are introduced to them in person. And I don't know what you thought of the way these kids looked, but it's pretty fucking nightmarish.
It's terrifying.
Now, this is a kids' film.
Yeah. Their heads are enormous, and they're like... They just look terrible as well. They're like the costume. Whoever made these is like, what on earth? Oh, obviously they had no budget for this. No. And the ones that actually are meant to look human are the more terrifying ones. Yeah. Like, the alligator is just like, that's just daft.
Yeah, you've seen that before.
The ones that are human heads are like, oh my god. What?
Like the one with the baby head. Yeah. These are basically like little bobble heads. So these are all little people, dwarves, sort of mounted with animatronic heads, which sounds really horrible. It did say on the IMDb trivia that the heads weren't really finished by the time filming started, but the director just said, well, hopefully they'll improve as we shoot. I'm not sure what the logic was there. They clearly were not finished, and the mouths didn't really move when obviously the voiceover had been recorded much, much later on. But your lineup here is Alligator, Messy Tessie, Windy Winston. You can imagine what he does. Nat Nerd, his special power, pissing himself repeatedly.
That's stupid.
Valerie Vomit, self-explanatory again. And the terrifying Foul Phil, which is the baby, who can only just go... Wah, wah. And a character called Greaser Greg. And inside this animatronic head, we have, for a record 4th time on the show, the returning Phil Fondacaro. So,
Remind me.
So, Mark, I know you probably know, but for our listeners, Phil Fondacaro, you will remember seeing him as the troubled, slightly suicidal dwarf in Troll.
Oh, yeah.
You will remember him as one of Willow's chums in Willow. You will remember not really seeing him in Invaders from Mars because he was like half of a goblin monster thing. And here he is for a fourth time. So he breaks Dennis Hopper's record of 3 times on the show. We are now discussing Phil Fondacaro for a fourth time, although we've only really seen him act twice.
Was this intentional?
No, just a lot of little people have done a lot of shit films.
Yeah.
And he's not even the only person from Willow in either of these films. So we'll come back to that. So there he is, Phil Fondacaro. I mean, I think his best work was as the depressing, suicidal dwarf in Troll. Yeah, I did a little sort of serious monologue, didn't he?
Oh,
that, if you remember. It was quite out of place in Troll, to be honest.
It was the surprisingly emotional moment.
Shakespearean monologue in the middle of Troll with Harry Potter and friends. So that's your lineup, and probably a few others that they're not as memorable. And they'll be popping up again and again. Basically, they're all just a punchline. They all have their thing that they do, and they do it, and it's going to get really fucking annoying. Stick with it. So the instructions that Captain Mancini gives is to, you guys behave yourselves. You're not allowed to leave the shop. The idea is that he picked these kids up on his travels, looking for weird curiosities across the world. Like, it's not really explained, is it? But no. These weird kids that are like deformed. Here begins really the main plot of the film. This is really a film about a young lady who becomes an entrepreneur and enters the fashion business.
Yeah.
That's the driving plot of the film. Not really anything to do with the kids. It's very strangely assembled.
They help her make these clothes.
Yeah.
But
so she goes. She says she bumps into Dodger and says, "Do you want to come to me to the dance clubs, quote unquote, where she's going to sell clothing to people in the car park." Fashionable 80s clothing, and you can imagine what that looks like. Just with awful music blaring out of the club. So this, is a very weird direction that we start to go in. The Garbage Pail Kids obviously escape, and they hijack a Pepsi truck. Pretty inexplicable, and they just pull up where...
Product placement?
Exactly, that's what I've written, product placement. They pull up in a sort of a middle of a waste ground, sort of huddle around a burning brazier and enjoy some delicious cold Pepsis. It taste of a new generation.
The Wayne's World, the cat.
It's the choice of the Garbage Pail Kids. Yeah, inexplicable. I think this film is at its worst when you have scenes where it's only the Garbage Pail Kids.
Yeah.
Because with no humans to do normal person dialogue, you've just got all of them doing their punchlines in a row.
The plot just falls apart. There's just nothing really going on.
So it'll be Alligator saying he wants to eat someone's toes, Windy Winston farts, Nat Nerd pisses himself, Foul Phil cries because he's a baby, and we rinse repeat really on that. That's the jokes, and it's a one trick pony really. They're caricatures, which is sort of the idea, which works in a trading card, but in a live action film, it's pretty annoying. But they make Dodger a jacket, and this gives him and Tangerine the bright idea to start a Garbage Pail Kids sweatshop. Now, I initially wrote Garbage Pail Kids sweatshop because I thought that sounded funny, and then about 30 seconds later, they enter a building with a big sign that says non-union sweatshop above it. So clearly the makers of this film thought that was funny as well. So as well as this weird love story between a woman trying to make it in the fashion world, we've got this strange political commentary about sweatshops.
Yeah.
And are they good? Are they bad? What do we think here? I'm not sure. Because they seem to be enjoying themselves. They complain a little bit, but they're helping their friend to get into the fashion world, I would stay away from that kind of political satire.
What's the message here?
I'm not sure. And we get the first of, luckily only a few musical numbers, and they're horrific.
yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. And it's stuff like, we can't do anything by working with each other. Like the Seven Dwarfs.
Makes
and
you cringe.
It's really bad, really badly written music, really poorly performed by the voice actors. I just thought, oh God, hope we don't get too many of these.
Yeah.
Keep these to a minimum. And it was at this point with the musical number and talking about let's work together, guys, teamwork, that I started to think, isn't this what the Cabbage Patch Kids would do? You're meant to be the Garbage Pail Kids.
Yeah.
Aren't you meant to be like the opposite and like the gross, like subverted version? But you're saying quite good and wholesome things.
Yeah.
Aren't you defeating the entire purpose of your brand?
You're not making the mockery that you were intending to.
You're trying to be more virtuous than the Cabbage Patch Kids and teach kids a good lessons. Like, you realise that's the entire opposite of what your point should be. You know?
Yeah.
So I think that's a kind of a big problem with this. I just wrote Nat keeps pissing because that happens about every 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Yeah.
He just goes, "Aww."
I don't know why I'm laughing because it's not funny. It's really boring.
It's really not. It's not funny the first time.
No.
And every time he does it, the rest of the kids go, "No, no." I don't think even kids are laughing at this, but maybe. They escape again and they all go on a trip to the movies. This is kind of funny. They wear disguises, so like trench coats and berets and sunglasses.
Yeah.
And they all get on little tiny quad bikes and go out just ripping around the town.
Yeah.
Some of them go to the theatre to watch a movie, but some of them go to what's called the world's toughest bar.
Oh, yeah.
Or the toughest bar in the world. Really tough biker bar. Alligator goes in and starts sucking toes because that's his very weird characteristic. But then it turns out the bikers actually get on quite well with the Garbage Pail Kids and they really like them. They start having a drink and stuff. Like, what? How does that fit in with, come on kids, let's work together. Now you're hanging out and like getting pissed up in a bar.
Toughest bar in the world. Well, it's not really. You've just befriended these weird children.
It's the bar where you can find bikers who quite enjoy having their toes sucked.
Yeah.
We get like a sort of what I would call a mischief montage. Just the Garbage Pail Kids getting up to all kinds of naughtiness around town. Redirecting the sewage, mostly. There's a montage of a guy sitting on the toilet and then, of course, the big flow comes from underneath and they've just turned the big wheel that goes... change the shit direction from City Zoo to the library, and then this guy's like, not funny at all. It's around this time that they start introducing this concept of the state home for the ugly. I'm not quite sure how this came up. I think I must have tuned out for maybe half a minute, and all of a sudden they're talking about the state home for the ugly. So this is some sort of like boogeyman sort of place. They're like, oh, you don't want to go there. That's where they send Garbage Pail Kids because they're so ugly and deformed. And it's introduced as this sort of, I guess, this sort of consequence where you might end up if you're not behaving yourself. There's also a montage of Tangerine's fashion business taking off. So the more clothes that the Garbage Pail Kids make, the more she sells, and she's getting on really well with Dodger. He thinks things are going really well, but what he doesn't know is that she's kind of using him, but then she's being used by Juice, and it's quite a complicated web of manipulation here. No one seems to be genuine apart from this Dodger kid who for some reason thinks he's going to get lucky here. Believe it or not, the actors that played Dodger and Tangerine were dating in real life when this film was being made.
How old are they?
Well, his character is meant to be 15 and she's meant to be older, but apparently they were both around 15, 16 maybe. So
in real life?
Yeah.
Wow.
But awkwardly, they broke up during the filming of the films.
Oh.
So if there's any scenes where they perhaps aren't gelling quite as well, that'll be it. Very, very odd backstory.
Because that would be the explanation for the awkwardness, not the fact that it's a terrible film.
The lack of chemistry, the fact that they're meant to be two children. Yeah. So really, it's all about the Garbage Pail Kids being exploited to make clothes for this fashion show. Again, a weird kind of misguided political satire, like, oh, how dare they use tiny children to make clothes? That's so wrong. Who would do that? You know, pretty lofty ideas for this kind of film. the plot really drops off at this point. There's a sort of an endless loop of just farting, pissing, Captain Mancini trying to work out how to play his magical piano to get the kids back in the garbage pail.
I think I zoned out during this part.
It becomes kind of like deprogramming or brainwashing kind of footage, just poke your eyes open with matchsticks and just watch this on a repeated loop. It kind of becomes a bit Dadaist, But Juice kidnaps the kids and actually sells them to the state home for the ugly. And inside the state home, it's really just a very small warehouse with like some boxes, and inside the boxes will be people with signs that say like too old, too bald, there's one with Santa in it that's like too fat or something like that. It's just, I don't know what the hell's going on. Around this time, Dodger realizes that Tangerine has been using him, and Juice has been using her, and it's all a ruse. So he gets all of the toughest bikers in the world to come help bust the kids out from the state home for the ugly, and lets all the other freaks out at the same time. They all crash the fashion show. Windy Winston gives one last enormous fart from the catwalk. Valerie Vomit finally does like a decent vomit, and like it's all like iridescent and like glowing blue. That was quite cool actually. And yeah, they ruin the fashion show. They agree to go back in the garbage pail, but when they have their eyes closed, the Garbage Pail Kids escape into the night, never to be seen again. So that is Garbage Pail Kids, one of the most famous bad films ever. Mark, what were your overall thoughts of this one?
Oh, it was painful. It's just bad, like really bad, because there's just very little plot. Like there's large sections of the film where it's just the Garbage Pail Kids just dicking around, and it's not entertaining, it's not funny.
But I think they thought it would be. They think, well, if kids like looking at these characters on trading cards, what if these characters came to life and actually farted and pissed? Wouldn't that be brilliant?
Just endless farting and pissing, which sounds funny when I'm describing it, but it's not worth it.
It's actually quite nightmarish to watch. Yeah.
And Alligator just seems to take the kind of centre stage. He seems to be one of the main Garbage Pail Kids,
which is weird because he's not human looking at all. He's just a little crocodile. Yeah.
And alligator is not far enough from alligator. It's not a good enough.
It's not a great pun, is it? No. I mean, there are plenty more of the characters they could have chosen for this film, but that was the best one, I think they thought.
I was struggling not to zone out throughout this film, certain parts, because it was just like boring. There were like parts of it where, like you said, the best part was where they were in the bar, and that was I agree, like that was kind of fun. There were some funny lines in that bit. But it doesn't really make up for the rest of it because it was just kind of shocking.
I should mention, for anyone who wants to watch this, we watched a delightful copy of this on YouTube.
Probably didn't help.
I think it did help. It's some sort of long lost VHS rip that's been sat in someone's attic for 30 years. Like you get tracking issues, you get like waviness.
It
the
was
audio
really bad.
drops out.
Some points it was like 1 frame per second or something.
I mean, I watched this on quite a big TV and it was horrendous. But I don't think it would have been any worse if it had been a crystal clear any better.
I wouldn't have gained anything from it watching it like
exactly. So I thought actually watching it on an awful VHS type rip was actually beneficial to the experience.
What were your thoughts?
Well, it's the second time I've seen this. First time was a few years ago when obviously I was curious because it was often referred to as the worst film ever made, and obviously a lot of films get that tag. I'm not sure if it should be up there with
Troll 2,
with the big boys. But even Troll 2 is fun. I like it. So I think this is one of those bad films that it's not bad enough to be like insufferable. It's also not bad enough to be enjoyable. It's a little bit boring, a little bit repetitive. I mean, certainly the appearance of the Garbage Pail Kids is something that'll keep you up at night.
That's burnt into my memory now.
I think the utter failure of this film is the effects and just the real lack of any dimension to these characters. Just the constant toilet humour. they are aiming this at kids, so maybe kids watch this and were like, that's hilarious, this kid keeps pissing himself, how hilarious. Maybe. I sort of think that kids watching this would maybe be more like, please turn this off, Mum. This is terrifying.
I think even little kids would know that this was dreadful and terrifying.
Yeah. I don't know who this is for, really. They clearly were trying to aim it at kids, but then the humour and the appearance of it just kind of... It was a mess. It was a real mess of a film. Yeah. I think it deserves its spot, perhaps in the top 10 worst films ever made, for good or bad. It's very poorly made. There's really no plot to it. It scared the shit out of you. But yeah, that's Garbage Pail Kids from 1987. And so we move on. Now I feel this is going to be a pretty lopsided episode, because this next film, it's one of these ones that I don't think is a bad film at all, but some people do. I would kind of liken it to my love of Street Fighter the movie, which we did not so long ago. In that I loved it as a kid. I still love it now, and at no point did I realise it was a bad movie, or if I did, it only enhanced the experience, Talking, of course, about Masters of the Universe, also from 1987. This is another movie by Cannon. We've come across a few of these, most notably on our Toby Hooper episode, where we reviewed 3 Cannon films, Life Force Invaders from Mars and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That's quite a mixed bag. This one is bigger budget than those, certainly. And this is a kids' film, which a lot of Cannon films were definitely not. They were quite horror-based or schlocky-based. They're still schlocky. But shout out to Bristol Bad Film Club. Actually, the first Bad Film Club screening I ever went to was Masters of the Universe in Victoria Park.
I was meant to go to that and I didn't make it.
And we didn't even know each other then.
Yeah.
Possibly, yeah.
We probably would have.
Yeah. We could have bonded over Masters of the Universe 6 years ago. But yeah, that was in Victoria Park in Bristol. I already loved it at the time, but it was great to see it on a big screen and with lots of other people who thought it was awesome. Of course, Masters of the Universe started off as a series of toys, action figures, in the early 80s. They essentially created a cartoon for the characters that were the action figures. Really, it's just an advert to sell more toys. The cartoon became wildly successful, super successful, sold even more toys. They made even more money from the cartoon, so it was inevitable that we were going to get to a live action adaptation of the film that came along here. I think this is more based off the action figures than it is off the cartoon, just the way the characters are portrayed, but they're still trying to keep it quite kid-friendly. Apparently Mattel specified that He-Man should not kill anyone in the film, as he would not do that in the cartoon. So they created the enemies that were meant to be robots. I don't know if you got that. The guys in black were meant to be robots, which it's fine to kill, not humans. All right, so make sure you note that. This one stars Dolph Lundgren. This is his 3rd film ever. Can you name his first 2?
Rocky 4.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I've seen him in before this.
He's coming hot off Rocky 4. His role as Ivan Drago.
What else is... I'm trying to think of... Is it another famous film?
Fairly. It's a big franchise.
I'm not sure.
He played a Bond henchman in A View to a Kill. Roger Moore's last outing as Bond.
So that's a pretty big film.
He was sort of 3rd in command under Grace Jones and Christopher Walken. Yeah. So it's a pretty great Bond film, actually, underrated. But this is his 3rd film. He's a bona fide action star by this point, which is quite impressive after 2 films.
Yeah.
He obviously made a big impression in Rocky 4, as Ivan Drago, who could forget that. Also in this film is a brilliant actor called Frank Langella, who plays Skeletor in this. He's done a bunch of films. He's quite a Shakespearean thespian. These films will often have one actor who's a proper actor. Yeah. This is why I liken this film to Street Fighter a lot, because he's the equivalent of Raul Julia as M. Bison in this.
I didn't realise he was going to be in it, and there's some other actors in it that I didn't realise about as well that we'll probably get onto.
But Frank Langella did this film because his kids loved He-Man. Yeah. And Raul Julia did Street Fighter because his kids loved Street Fighter. So there's a lot of similarities between those 2 actors and these 2 roles. Proper thespians coming into play, this ridiculous cartoonish character, but actually doing it so well that you kind of forget that how it's a man with a skull for a head, and there's none of the kind of from the cartoon. That's all gone, and it's quite like he quotes Richard III and stuff like that. You know, he's awesome. And as you mentioned, in her first on-screen feature film, Courtney Cox.
Very young.
Very, very young. Hot off of the Bruce Springsteen video, Dancing in the Dark, maybe, in which it's a sort of a fake live video where she gets randomly, quote unquote, picked to come out of the audience and dance on stage with Bruce Springsteen. So that's what she was famous for at this point in 1987. So
she must have been late teens, early 20s, I guess.
Yeah, I would imagine around 20-ish, yeah. And then also in this film we have someone else who is returning to the show. I mentioned it before. Anytime you see a dwarf or a little person in a film, you know damn well we've probably seen them in something else. And the guy that plays Gwildor, the little sort of dwarf in this, is a guy called Billy Barty, who you may remember from Willow also, as kind of the wizard guy with the long grey beard and would do these... He always squints and he would do these weird riddles in Willow and no one would know what he was talking about. So. Two people from Willow in two films that were, and Willow was made after this, so they were, if you were a dwarf in the 80s, you were either in Willow or Return of the Jedi or both. Yeah. It's a good time. It was a good time for little actors.
You'd have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. Now I found this quite remarkable. Billy Barty, the guy that plays this Gwildor character, his filmography, not his life. His filmography spans 1927 to the year 2000. That's just his filmography.
Oh my God.
Not how long he was alive, but how long he was doing films.
That's unbelievable.
Unless he was a baby in his first film. I can't quite figure that out. But that's according to IMDb, so fair play to Billy Barty. I think this was maybe his 200th film or something like that. A real veteran at this point, yeah. So
that's some good trivia.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Billy Barty, fair play. So we open up with a very sort of brief glimpse of Castle Grayskull and a bit of a sort of spiel about, how the idea in Masters of the Universe is everyone's trying to control Castle Grayskull, and if you have the power of Grayskull, you have the power to control the universe. I'm sure you know all this already.
Yeah.
Anyone who's seen the cartoons know this sort of basic idea. So it does actually start off in Eternia, where the cartoon is set all the time. They were planning to set all of the film in Eternia, but had to kind of scrap that due to obvious budget constraints that would cause, And although that being said, the sets that are in Eternia, I think, are pretty awesome. The the interior of Skeletor's castle and stuff like that, they look pretty awesome. Straight away, you get Skeletor coming straight out of the bat with some awesome dialogue by Frank Langella. His second in command, Evil Lyn, also from the cartoons, played by Meg Foster. It's all set in Eternia. They've taken a sorceress hostage, and they're going to use her to open up, the power of the universe or something like that. And then straight away it kicks off with He-Man, Dolph Lundgren himself, lumbering in and attacking all of these weird black-clad troopers. Now, I don't really remember this as a kid, but this is my first indication. This film is an awful lot like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Throughout, but especially the music and the way that the sort of goons are dressed like stormtroopers. Yeah. The music is very close to Star Wars. I'm surprised they didn't get sued by Lucasfilm like the Garbage Pail Kids got sued. It's very, very, very close to what was obviously massive in the 80s Star Wars. It's around this time we are introduced to Gwildor, Billy Barty himself. So this is a very short character with sort of pointy ears. He's quite wise. He sort of reminds me of Yoda, perhaps. Lives in a little hut. Yeah. We could do a big list of these.
It's definitely a character for every character in Star Wars.
There is, yeah. He invites them into their home and he shows them what's known as the Cosmic Key, which is a really big feature of this film. This little, it's sort of like a gun, like a sort of bit of lighting. I'm not sure how they cobbled this together, like a really proggy saxophone. It's like an instrument someone's created, and it plays a little tune, and that's going to be quite key, no pun intended, to the film. So something about this key allows Skeletor to invade Eternia. Now we get to probably my absolute favourite part of this film, other than Skeletor, the bounty hunters, the mercenaries, should I say, that are brought in. Now this is exactly a carbon copy of a scene in The Empire Strikes Back, where Darth Vader is recruiting, I think 4 bounty hunters to find Han Solo. And they all look very similar to the ones in this film. They call them mercenaries. They don't say bounty hunters, but my God, they're coming very close to Star Wars in the first 10 minutes. You know,
assemble the mercenaries.
Yeah,
you just get a shot of them just standing in line, and
yeah. I do really like these mercenaries. There's what is there one called Blade, who's got like an eye patch and loads of like blades coming out of him, as you'd expect. There's like a lizard guy, which is pretty cool, like an Argonian from Skyrim. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Beast Man. Memorable character from the cartoons and the comics as well. He's awesome. He's just exactly what he sounds like, you know, Beast Man. And Karg is the sort of lead mercenary, but I do find him to be the most ridiculous because his hair is like Motley Crue times 10. He's got this bouffant long hair that's about 3 foot off the top of his skull, maybe, and he looks ridiculous, like Bonnie Tyler without her makeup on. You know, it's brilliant. But he does all the dialogue, I guess, because he speaks English. So they're awesome. They're going to come up a lot in the film as well. He-Man has a brief skirmish with Skeletor, and during this, they somehow they teleport to Earth using the cosmic key. But they lose the key along the way. So there's the sort of basic plot of the film. We need to find the cosmic key because if Skeletor gets the cosmic key, he'll unlock the universe and he'll rule the universe and typical kind of stuff, but pretty simple to follow for kids and adults alike. It's quite a good gag initially where they sort of scan something coming on their radar towards them and, oh my God, it's an alien life form and it's just a cow, which is quite a good gag. Yeah. I mean, you sort of know what you're in for here. There's going to be a lot of fish out of water humour. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the first Thor film, where I think they did that to death. It's just constantly Thor saying stuff like, "What is this container that you drink out of? What is this metal thing that rolls in the street?" And just like looking at every single piece of modern technology and doing like a stupid gag. Luckily they don't go quite as in on it in this movie, but there is a little bit of that.
And the girl, they're eating ribs, I think. And they're like, this came from an animal? Like, she didn't understand what it was.
A little satire there. Yeah. How barbaric. How can you eat something that was once an animal? What are these white things that the meat is on? You know, how ingenious that you would use this to hold meat. You know,
that's bone.
It's quite a funny little gag. I like it.
Yeah,
we are introduced to Courtney Cox here as a sort of hapless teenager called Julie, and her boyfriend. They end up finding the cosmic key just sort of in the bush outside the fast food restaurant. Her boyfriend says, "Oh, I think it's a Japanese synth. I've seen this in a magazine." So that's your first indication that he's a real cool 80s musician kind of guy. I'm surprised he didn't have like a keyboard necktie. That's how cool he was, you know. Leather jacket rolled up to the elbows, you know. They take it back to this sort of hall that they're staying in. He says, "Let me amp it up, you know, plug it into the amplifier and I'll give you a blast of it." So he plays a little tune on it. And of course that's a bit silly because that's how the mercenaries are able to locate them. They sort of harass Courtney Cox, and then He-Man sort of swoops in to rescue her. And there's a sort of a split here now in the plot where He-Man, Julie, Gwildor and the rest are in one group, and then her boyfriend has gone to the music shop and he meets this detective, and that's kind of another group of good guys that are making it more difficult for the mercenaries to track down the cosmic key. Yeah, there's this detective character I think is quite a strong point of the film as well. He's played by a guy called Tolkien. He was the instructor in Top Gun, the sort of hard-ass instructor. He was in Back to the Future. I sort of feel like I've seen him in more than that. Yeah. But I think he's just quite memorable.
It seems like we've reviewed films that he's... like a few films that he's...
You'd think so, but I've looked through his filmography and I don't see much that I recognise. It's weird. He's just this great kind of like completely bald, smooth, like hard-ass cop, and he's just got the most awesome like New York wise guy accent. I think he's pretty great. I want to see more of his films now after seeing him in this, because he's quite funny. But the mercenaries are not able to get hold of the cosmic key, so they have to return to Skeletor. And I was quite gutted at this point, because my favourite mercenary is the lizard guy, and he's the first one to be vaporised. Actually, the only one to be vaporised. Which is pretty annoying. Like, I thought he was really cool. Like, he's a lizard, like a snake. He's got a helmet on. He's got a blaster.
Yeah.
Like, he's way cooler than the guy with the massive hair metal quiff. But he gets vaporized by Skeletor. So I'm still not okay with this. But then Evil Lyn, Skeletor's henchwoman, takes his place, and they go sort of regroup to try and find this again. They locate the cosmic key, which is currently at Julie's boyfriend's house. And there's just a massive racket outside. They kick in the door, and the Beast Man just bursts in. Ah! Really, scary. And her boyfriend just throws a dishcloth at him. I was like, what? So they sort of capture him. They put this weird electronic collar around him, and he has to tell the truth if they ask him a question when he's wearing the collar of truth, if you like. It's quite an interesting bit of sort of technology. I quite like the Masters of the Universe, especially in this film, because it's fantasy, but it's also a bit of sci-fi. Because even though they're barbarians and warriors and stuff, they also have technology, alien computers and technology. They're not just idiots with swords. They've got their own cool technology that they can use on us, like the cosmic key. Yeah. It's way more advanced than what we have.
Like that kind of futuristic element.
Futuristic fantasy, I think, is much more interesting.
Yeah.
Than your Conan the Barbarian type stuff. Well, again, maybe that's them really trying to rip off Star Wars. That resulted in that. And to be honest, we've reviewed worse films that have ripped off Star Wars. You might remember Turkish Star Wars that we reviewed. So this is not the only...
That's going back away now.
That's going back, 10, 20 episodes?
Yeah.
This is far from the only film to rip off Star Wars, and actually one of the better results in the end. But all the good guys kind of meet up again in one group. Gwildor keeps dressing up in funky 80s fashion, which is a running gag. He'll sort of come out from behind someone. He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt and some cool zebra print sunglasses, and then whoever's there will go, "What the hell is that?" Yeah. It's a running joke. So they end up getting the key off of the cop, trying to evade Evil Lyn's invading forces. But this leads to quite a good action set piece, I think. All the good guys are inside the music shop, and all of the bad guys are outside trying to get into the music shop. So all the good guys have got to shoot from behind stacks of Marshalls and old keyboards and stuff like that. And all of the bad guys are just lined up in the street, blasting them with lasers and stuff. I thought that was quite cool. Bit of a standoff. Probably the only thing I don't really like about this film is how easy it is to get the key off of Julie's character, because all Evil Lyn does is pretend to be her dead mother and goes, Julie, and then so she goes out into the alleyway. "Oh, I thought you were dead." Yeah. No, I'm not dead. No. "Oh, thank God for that. I could have sworn you were, I went to your grave. I went to your funeral. You're definitely dead. It was a plane crash." But I thought it's just really lazy. This made this Julie character seem like a real idiot. Yeah. That she would fall for something. Yeah. And as soon as she gives her the key, she transforms back and runs off.
And then she's so shocked. She's like, "No!"
I gotta say, I don't think Courtney Cox would be very proud of this acting. But yeah, she sort of clutches her temples. I can't do it justice, but look it up. Not the finest performance here from Courtney Cox. She would get better. Mother Disguise gets the cosmic key, and this allows Skeletor to actually appear in Earth, on the planet Earth, accompanied by pretty awesome, I think, these hoverboard soldiers. So these are people that are sort of surfing on these little manhole covers, just zipping through the streets, and that in itself is quite cool. But what's even cooler is that He-Man is able to commandeer one of these, and so you get this dogfight where, from the wide angles it looks awful. It's this superimposed tiny He-Man flitting about like a little Subbuteo figure. Yeah. And then they'll go in for a really close shot, and he's shooting his lasers. Then it'll back out again, and this it was not very seamless.
No.
The continuity between these shots was dreadful. I think they were going for the sort of speeder fight in Return of the Jedi, zipping through the forest, like that kind of thing, but wasn't quite as accomplished as those effects were. Skeletor kind of tricks He-Man. He's like, I'll kill the humans if you don't surrender yourself. So because He-Man's such a good guy, he's such a heroic guy, he gives himself up under the agreement that the humans will be left alone. Somewhere during this sort of scuffle with Skeletor, Courtney Cox gets shot in the leg by a sort of pink laser. And then like 10 minutes later, they pull up her dress and it's like oozing with green stuff, and it like looks like it's about to be chopped off or something. Like, yeah, that's definitely poison. What a poisonous laser beam! Like, what is this?
It's like some like luminous gangrene.
Yeah.
Like.
I don't think this Julie character really gets a very fair shake in this film. Now, it's around this time that Skeletor returns to Eternia. He approaches his throne room and he is passed his staff by a curious-looking character wearing a pig mask. Now, this is someone who won a contest. Mattel won a contest associated with the toys that entered this competition and will put you in the Masters of the Universe film. So this was like a little kid that had entered, I assume a little kid, that had entered this competition, and then they put him in the film, and they even gave him like his own character. He's credited as Pig Boy in the credits, and you get to see a mask, and he hands him the staff. It's like a proper role in the film. So this was just a kid that had won a competition.
But it lasts about 3 seconds.
Oh, he's not an actor. What are you going to do? You want to stick him in a dwarf outfit?
That's pretty cool if you like won a competition and you get to be in a film.
Yeah. It's a cameo.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no point showing his face. He's nobody,
Yeah.
Make him a weird pig boy. Like, if you didn't know that, you'd wonder, who is that? Why does he look like a pig? Everyone else has got like a black helmet, The sorceress that had been held captive is now like really old and crumbly. She's lost all of her magic power. Blade, the bounty hunter, gets his laser whip out. This is quite funny effects. I don't know if it's meant to be somewhat biblical, but He-Man is sort of chained up and lashed till he's raw by a red laser whip.
Yeah.
The effects are like pretty drawn on in felt tip.
It's like a flexible lightsaber.
Yeah, I think it looks a bit shit, but Frank Langella kind of sells it as Skeletor because his facial reactions when he's watching it. At first, he's like smiling and he's like, haha, but then after a while, he starts to wince a little bit, which I think is quite cool. Like, he's the villain, but after a while, he's like, ooh.
This is wrong.
Yeah, it's a bit much. Stop now. I think that's great acting on his part, especially as he's under quite a lot of prosthetic makeup. I mean, I don't know what you thought of the Skeletor makeup. I mean, it's a bit cheap looking, but I mean, it's either that or have literally just a skull that goes and dub the voiceover later. So
I thought it was pretty cool for
cool.
Campy kind of movie. So.
I mean, he's got the hood, and I think what's quite cool about it is obviously it's like a alabaster white face, so it always absorbs the lighting that's around. So if something red is happening, it'll be a slight pink tinge across his face. I thought that's quite cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the costume design in this film is excellent.
Yeah.
If the visual effects are a bit shoddy, which they are, I think all the budget went on the sets and the costume.
Yes.
Like I mentioned, I noticed for the first time ever, Skeletor had tiny little skulls on the tips of his fingers. If you look at like the breastplates that the mercenaries are wearing, some of them have like little patterns and snakes and stuff like that. I think it's really good work with the costume department. But it's around this time that Skeletor he takes the He-Man sword and he puts it in a sort of holster next to his throne, and this I think unleashes the power of the universe somewhat. A big portal opens and all this like gold energy starts flowing into his face, and then we get like one of my favourite things ever in any film. Super Skeletor. All of a sudden, he goes from being this sort of like old man in a cloak to this like guy wearing a suit of gold armor, and he's got like this headdress, like an Indian sort of Hindu like spiky gold headdress, and he can shoot like gold energy from his eyes.
Yeah.
And he's got this massive like gold staff. I think it's fucking awesome costume design. Like, they didn't even have to do this. They could have kept the same costume all the way, and I wouldn't have minded. But this super gold Skeletor, I think, is fucking awesome. Around this time, the Earthlings teleport in somehow. I think they figure out how to play the Cosmic Key melody, and there's the whole street teleports in, which I think is quite cool. Like a car, a brick wall, just like a circular. It's like Terminator, like a circular radius of the street just goes. Whoosh, including Lubick, the detective. He's got some good one-liners around here as well. So it all kicks off. Basically, everyone starts fighting everyone else. There's a moment where He-Man swings on a long bit of drapery, which I think is again a bit of a Star Wars thing, or like a swashbuckling thing, which I think is quite cool. It's all building up to this moment. Of course, he's able to reclaim the sword from the holster next to the throne. I have the power. Awesome.
This is the most iconic part of the whole film.
I get like super excited still now when he does that. Yes, come on, fuck him up. I think quite a comparatively quick sword fight with Skeletor, but He-Man kind of finishes him off and kicks him into this like pit, and he falls, and he falls. We cut away, cut back. He's still falling. No. Comical.
It's a very classic kind of Hollywood fall.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like Phantom Menace when Darth Maul is falling for ages.
Yeah.
Like, again, a Star Wars kind of thing. And that's it, really. Skeletor defeated. Lubick decides he's going to stay because he's got a wife all of a sudden. That was very quick. And then they do the whole... I'm not sure if I really like this, but Julie gets transported back. She wakes up and all of a sudden her parents are alive, and it's the day that they're going to catch the plane that would kill them. No, don't go. don't get on that plane. I'll take the keys. And she'll take the keys as she runs out. I don't know if this was necessary, really. I guess it's a happy air ending, but you know. And there you go, but they still have a little like a little blue rock, which is the power of Eternia in a sort of a gemstone form. So yeah, that is Masters of the Universe from 1987. What were your overall thoughts of this one, Mark?
Yeah, it was quite entertaining. Like you said, the costumes very much stuck out.
Yeah.
And the set piece, the set designs and stuff. It was a very quite visually pleasing film. And it was very much of its time in that way as well. It was very visually, it looked very 80s fantasy kind of thing. But yeah, some of the costumes were like, that is really cool looking.
It's like, I think they had a massive budget. I mean, actually, I read on the trivia that Canon Films, they originally had planned to make a Spider-Man film, and they had the rights and they had the money set aside, and they decided that they would split the money in half and make this film and Superman 4. Yeah. And then off the back of the money those films make an even bigger Spider-Man film. Yeah. But neither of those films made the money back, and I think it wasn't much longer for Canon Films after this, unfortunately. So it had a fair old budget. I mean, I don't know what the Spider-Man film would have looked like in 1987, but the budget for this film is actually, I think, probably quite big for their films. Yeah. Maybe this was one of the biggest budgets they ever had. I
mean, they got some big names in it. Some of them weren't big yet.
They seem big now. Yeah, they do.
So Dolph Lundgren was already established.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, or he'd been in a couple of sort of
it's like his first
successful films, and people that were to go on to be big actors. And some of the acting was really good. Some of it was like pretty decent. It was just quite like entertaining in a very sort of campy way. Yeah. It did what I expected it to do, really. Yeah. And it was good fun.
Well, I think it's fucking awesome. You probably know. Yeah. One of my favourite films from the 80s.
I didn't think it was that bad.
No, I mean it was a failure. Commercially and critically a failure, so I think that's why it gets called a bad movie. But like, I've never considered this a bad movie, and I know a lot of people that would also agree it's actually an awesome movie. Just really cheesy, really schlocky.
Yeah, it's schlocky. It's definitely it definitely qualifies for this podcast.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, what I really like as well about the film is that it really like rattles along. There's no time to get bored. It's like even the first 10 minutes were like, bam, bam, bam. We're in Eternia, Skeletor. There's these characters. There's these mercenaries. There's this little dwarf. There's this key. Oh shit, we're in the planet Earth now. This is like the first quarter of an hour, maybe. Like, I'm like, oh my god, like this is. I like you know when we watch these films and we can't keep up with the notes. It's like what just happened.
Yeah.
But like I say, I can consider this one of the best films we've ever reviewed on this show, along with Street Fighter the movie. Lots of similarities to Street Fighter the movie in its sort of cartoonishness and its campiness, and Raul Julia and Frank Langella are doing very similar things, very similar performances, and really taking out what could have been a super cheesy villain and actually making it kind of like Shakespearean, and even the post-credit sequence, like almost identical to Street Fighter.
Yeah.
There's a post-credit sequence where Skeletor pops out of the pops out of the cherry aid and says, "I'll be back," because they thought this was going to be huge. They thought this film would be huge. There'd be sequels.
It flopped.
And it flopped massively. And they could never make a sequel. People have pondered a remake over the years. Chris Hemsworth attached, of course. Who else?
Became bigger later on, I guess.
I think it's become very cult, and even the He-Man cartoon is even more so.
Yeah, that's the main one.
So it's all on Netflix, I think, now, and they've even made new versions of it, and that's quite a surprisingly long-running franchise for something that was just like a little toy in the 80s. Not many 80s toys can boast this kind of legacy,
No.
in film, in TV, in how iconic they are, and He-Man is that iconic, so yeah, absolutely one of my favourite films. This is one from the old classic VHS collection once again. Seems to be every episode, but it was right there next to Street Fighter the movie in my VHS collection. It probably would have been one of the ones I'd pick out on a Saturday or Sunday morning, like, we'll have another go on that. Yeah. Masters of the Universe, it's not a bad film at all. It's brilliant. There you go. Masters of the Universe. So, I mean, like I say, pretty lopsided here, but if you had to teleport one of these films back in time to the day before it was greenlit and stop someone from putting the production in motion, which film would you stop from being created? Which film would you allow to be made?
I'll just say Garbage Pail Kids can go in the bin. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, or in the modern parlance, get in the fucking sea. Yeah.
It was just like,
it's horrendous.
It was just bad. Like, it was just, there was no. The plot was so thin that it was just so boring. There were long, drawn out periods of unfunny, quote unquote, humour.
Yeah.
The costumes not only freaked me out, but they just didn't. I just didn't want to have to look at them.
It's just so at odds with itself.
Yeah.
Like, it's meant to be for kids. It's fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
It's meant to be funny. It's painfully unfunny and like pretty base. It just fails on everything it's set out to do. And like I said, the worst crime of all is that the Garbage Pail Kids ended up being really wholesome and teaching kids to be themselves and stuff. These are meant to be disgusting, like nihilistic kind of characters. Like, these were originally intended to like completely subvert goody two-shoe kids' toys, and they just completely fucked that up. Like, and
failed in more ways than one.
In every way, yeah. So,
Masters of the Universe was genuinely entertaining.
Yeah.
And was a lot more visually pleasing. Like we said, the costumes were actually really cool. They really brought the characters out, and the set pieces, the set design was really cool as well. And it was just entertaining throughout. Like you said, you were just thrown into it, and all this stuff's happening. It's like, oh, cool. Stuff's happening in this film. Nothing happened in Garbage Pail Kids.
No, that is true.
There was a thin plot about a fashion designer and they went to like a fashion show, and that was it.
I would say more happened in the first 10 minutes of Masters of the Universe than happened in an hour and a half of Garbage Pail Kids.
I mean, I know obviously in Masters of the Universe they're essentially just going after this key, but you didn't want it to be too complex for a kids' film anyway, so
no,
it was still entertaining, and there was
it was a pretty simple plot, but even then, it was quite simple enough.
There's still enough going on. A nice, satisfying ending.
Yeah.
I have the power.
Yeah. Once again, like one more time at the end, I have the power. You're like, fucking one more time. It's like an encore,
And the classic full death from Skeletor.
Yeah. Skeletor's great. It's a great villain.
It's everything you want from a 80s fantasy film.
Makes me want to watch more Frank Langella performances. I think he's really good. So, if you like these films and you want more like this, for Masters of the Universe, like I said, I think Street Fighter, even though Street Fighter is not a fantasy, I think it's very similar in a lot of ways in the way it's adapting something that's sort of not necessarily live action and making it really cartoonish in the sort of process, making it quite fun. Probably Willow. I think we did that a few episodes ago.
Yeah. Just
purely from a sort of fantasy, swords and sorcery. There's loads of that in the 80s, but Willow's one of them. Conan and the Barbarian, that sort of thing. For that, if you want more things like the Garbage Pail Kids, I think we've probably already done them, like Troll 2, similar.
They're better.
They are freakish kind of little characters. Time Bandits, maybe that's got quite a big little person cast. I mean, I don't want to just recommend stuff with dwarves in it, but that's all I can think of really. Yeah, there's not really anything like Garbage Pail Kids. Stuff like Ghoulies, Troll 2, Critters. That's more your sort of good animatronic horror comedy stuff. I feel that's more well done. I think the only way we're going to get Phil Fondacaro on for a fifth time is if we do the Ghoulies films. So maybe we'll have to do those, But we'll let someone else maybe try and have a go next time. Okay, so it's been a while since we've done one of these episodes. Of course, the pandemic played havoc. We could have done this over a phone, but we wanted to be here in a room for you guys to get the best quality show. So we're doing these more regularly again now. So follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Subscribe on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the feed, and you'll obviously be notified anytime we do a new episode. Go over on the YouTube channel. There's still content coming out on there. I debuted a new feature during lockdown called Franchise Flashback, which I may do more of. It was over Easter weekend when I watched all 6-7 Tremors films in a weekend. Bloody good fun, I've got to say. Yeah, it's not as bad as it sounds. So if you want to know what my entire retrospective of the Tremors films in under 15 minutes, go over to the YouTube channel for Schlock Tactics. We'll be back sooner rather than later, and sooner than the last episode with some more schlocky goodness for you, but get in touch in the meantime. Give us a rating on iTunes. Let us know if there's anything you'd like us to review.
Leave some comments.
Some comments. We don't have to review stuff with dwarves in it. We can do other stuff. It's just coincidence.
Yeah.
So
we get drawn in to dwarves.
They've just got the schlockiest filmography. So look at Phil Fondacaro on IMDb. I encourage you. But yeah, that has been another episode of Schlock Tactics. My name is Ben Ash, and I've been joined once again by Mark.
Thank you for listening.
And we'll see you again next time. Bye.